Hello everyone. So this is for our chapter 2 for our subject system integration and architecture. So in chapter 1 we discussed about the introduction to enterprise architecture. We also discussed the inputs, the measurements and the roadmap, principles and target visions for the enterprise architecture. So for today, we'll be discussing about the structure and culture of enterprises. So we have the key term which is culture. What is culture? So this is the beliefs, customs, values, structure, normative rules, and material traits of a social organization. So culture is evident in many aspects of an organization function. So just like yung mga culture natin sa Pilipinas natin, we do have cultures everywhere, di ba? Kunyari, merong culture sa Pampanga, even sa loob ng isang province, we have different cultures, di ba? And Pampanga as the food capital of the Philippines, di ba? Isa yun sa naging culture natin. And kilala ang San Fernando for the di ba yung tinatawag nating parole capital of the Philippines, di ba? Kung saan yung tama ba yung term ko, parole ba? Ayun. And then sa iba't ibang lugar din ng Pilipinas, we have different cultures, di ba? Mga beliefs. Pagdating naman sa religion, we also have different beliefs, diba? Nag-revision sa iba't ibang bansa din. And ayun, that's about the. And then stakeholders naman, everyone who is or will be affected by a program, project or activity or resource. Stakeholders for the EA program include sponsors, the architects, the program managers, users, and support staff. So ito yung mga stakeholders. So even with the different we are a school, so as a student, you are considered as the stakeholders of the school. So for the EA program, ito yung mga sponsors, architects, program managers, users, and support staff. And then what are the objectives for this lesson for the chapter 2? So understand the structural and cultural aspects of an enterprise. Understand the differences between an organization and an enterprise. Become familiar with the models of organizations and enterprise. Be able to tie structural and cultural aspect of the enterprise to the architecture. So these are the objectives that we will learn in our lesson for today. As an introduction, enterprise architecture is as much about people and social interaction as it about processes and resources utilization. Understanding each of this aspect, an enterprise is essential to the development of accurate views of the current architecture and relevant, meaningful views of the future architect. So yun nga yung sinasabi nga natin before, di ba, with our previous lesson in the introduction to enterprise architecture. It is about the people and the social interaction and also the processes ng mga business itself. Di ba? Pinag-uusapan natin how business works, kung paano ba natin sila ma-automate, and how we can use the automation para mapabilis yung business operation. And we have also the home architecture analogy. So an architect needs to understand the composition, preferences, and activities of the owner's family to be able to produce an effective design for their new or remodeled home. How they will use the rooms, their activity patterns, and storage needs are example of the factor to be considered. So as an architect kasi, di ba, you need to consider everything about the house. The composition, ilan ba sila sa bahay nila? Ano ba yung mga preferences nila? And then out of those preferences, you need to make suggestion. Okay? You make suggestion, ano ba yung mas maganda? And activities of the owners, ano ba yung trabaho nila? Ano ba yung mga madalas nilang ginagawa? So that you can able to design an effective house for them. Okay, and insight into the people aspect of enterprises is also important to development of policy, standards, and an EA management plan that will be accepted by the enterprise. Of course, in every business, di ba, hindi pwedeng walang tao yan. So lahat halos or lahat ng business ng mga taong at the back of the business. And then moving from current to future states of the EA involves changes in processing and how people will communicate. Change involves moving from what is familiar to something unfamiliar, which is uncomfortable and or threatening to many people. Therefore, there may be resistance to programs such as TA that cause or support changes in resources and processing throughout the enterprises. Because of the EA, di ba, dahil nga nagkakaroon ng transition from manual into automation, di ba, nakikita natin yung mga uncomfortable sila, okay, or nag-threaten sila because of the transition. So, gaya ng mga na-experience din natin ngayon, diba, through the transition natin for the new LMS, diba, medyo natatakot tayo on how we will be able to use the new LMS. But as the time goes by, this LMS will be a huge help for us teachers and for you as students. And then influences on the field of enterprise architecture. So EA is fundamentally an evaluation and depiction of people, processes, and resources. So some of the areas of practice and theory that have influenced the emerging discipline of EA include the business administration, the public administration, operations research, sociology, organizational theory, management theory, information science, and computer science. So, ang dami, di ba? Ang daming pwedeng maapektuhan ng EA. Hindi lang sa atin as the information science or information technology or computer science. There are also many areas of practices, okay, na pwedeng magamit yung enterprise architecture. So understanding the mission, goals, and culture of an enterprise is an important to implementing an EA as the selection of analytic methods and documentation techniques. The approach described in the book is based on theories of how social enterprises are structured and how system and activities function within enterprises. So meron tayong figure shows the academic fields and area of theory practice that influence EA. So meron tayong contributing fields, the psychology, sociology, political science, public administration. So emerging fields naman, we have the information resources management, the information security, enterprise architecture, records and data management. Then contributing fields, engineering, computer science, business administration, operation research. Then concepts naman, nandiyan yung beliefs, values and ethics, leadership, culture, language and meaning, competition and bureaucracy. Then emerging concepts, system lifecycle development, information assurance, IT program management, knowledge management, IT capital planning, e-government and commerce, digital divide. And some contributing concepts are process, technology, management, quality, environment, engineering, and risk. Okay, so with the organizational theory and system theory, we have the enterprise architecture. Then the structure of enterprises, so in this part of chapter 2, there will be some references to organization instead of enterprise because the concepts come from established organizational theory. The concepts of organizational theory also apply to enterprises because they are types of social organization. Organization and enterprises are essentially complex social systems, which regardless of the mission, share many similarities in their basic structure and functions. So we have the model here, the Leavitt Diamond model. So one of the early models of general organization structure is the Leavitt Diamond. It is presented in 1965. Ay kung makikita niyo sa ating right side of our screen. So it's argued that a change in any of these four components will have an effect on the other, and that the interaction of the components underlies our organizational success. So, pagka merong isang nag-load dyan, di ba, nagkaroon ng changes from one of each other. So, magkakaroon din ng changes sa iba. Kaya nga, for example, nagkaroon ng changes sa technology, magkakaroon din ng changes sa people, sa structure, and sa task. So, same goes to sa iba, pag nagkaroon ng changes sa structure, maapektuhan din ng lahat. So, kung pag-uusapan natin yan sa enterprise architecture, di ba, pagka nagkaroon ng changes din sa from manual to automation, di ba, marami talagang maapektuhan. Halos lahat, from the structure, the task, and the people, maapektuhan sila. And then we also have the Parsons-Thompson model. Another model of general organization structure is a three-level view that was originally envisioned by sociologist Talcott Parsons in the 1950s and further developed by sociologist James Thomson in the 1960s. So Parsons' research identified three general levels that are common to most social organizations. We have the technical, managerial, and institutional. So based on the observation that different types of activities occur at this level, Thomson built on Parsons' ideas by further identifying the different type of activities that occur at this level. So we have the figure, okay, the Parsons-Thomson model of enterprise. So meron tayo organizational level, we have the structure and the function. Doon sa structure, that is the Parsons purpose of each level. And then the function naman is the Thomson's level of activities. So sa institutional, where the organization establish rules and relate to the larger society, that is derives legitimation, meaning and higher level support, thus making possible the implementation of the organizational goals. So, ito naman dito, pinag-usapan naman natin dito sa institutional, is the rules and relates to the larger society. Okay, kung bang legitimate ba siya? Legitimation, meaning and higher level support. And for the functions naman, for the institutional, the organization is very open to the environment in order to determine its domain, establish boundaries, and secure legitimacy. For the managerial naman, for the structure, where mediation between the organization and the immediate task environment occurs, where the organization's internal affairs are administered, and where the organization's product are consumed and resources supplied. So a dynamic of mediation occurs where less formalized and more political activities occur. And then for the technical, where the actual product of an organization is processed. For the function, the organization is rational as it carries on the production or the input-output functions and tries to seal off those functions from the outside to protect them from external uncertainties as much as possible. So dun sa managerial, dyan yung mga immediate task environment. Okay? Kung saan yung about yung sa loob, internal affairs. Okay? And for the technical naman, this is the actual product of an organization. So the geometry of the Parsons-Thomson model has been adopted by the author to resemble a series of concentric circles. This may provide a more useful image for depicting a social organization that interacts with its environment via the model's institutional level, facilitates internal resources by the managerial level, and protects a core of essential process and resources at the technical level. Kung napapansin nyo, di ba, from the institutional kanina up to the managerial, okay, about the internal resources, and protects a core of essential processes, papunta dun sa technical level. So we have the figure that shows the spherical version of the Parsons-Thomson model, which also is more useful in relating it to how an EA framework can document organizational functions. So, ito yun. As you can see, dun sa institutional levels, nandiyan yung goals and initiatives and products and services. So, same goes through sa managerial naman. Nandiyan yung products and services, data information, and system and application. And about the technical level, nandiyan yung systems and application, and network and infrastructure. So, mapapansin nyo, there are some of na connected dun sa isa't isa. Okay? So we have this cube architecture documentation framework. And then the value of Parsons-Thomson model is it's used as an authoritative reference for developing EA views of structure and processes for an organization. Regardless of the model's wide acceptance in academia, the question of whether this 50-year-old view will be relevant and useful to understanding the structure of the current public and private sector organizations is answered by observing that many large and medium-sized corporations and government agencies continue to hierarchical, rule-based, and goal-oriented. These were some of the primary characteristics of the rational organization that Parsons and Thomson originally studied. So, kung nakikita kasi natin kanina, this is a 50-year-old view, okay? During 1950s, di ba? And meron pa ring mga evidence, okay, that is still being a valid model. Is also seen in the rational nature of organizational charts, mission statements, strategic plans, operational plans, and business surveys of these types of organization. However, there are new types of organizations that have emerged due to technology-based changes in how people communicate and work. So, global telecommunications and the internet have made location a largely irrelevant factor in terms of where some types of work are being done. Example is the knowledge work and online services. So, di ba, nauuso na rin ngayon yung mga, anong tawag dito, yung mga virtual assistant or VA, di ba? So, even if you are not in kasama kanya talaga dun sa location, di ba? By the virtual assistant, dito pwede mong utusan yung virtual assistant mo to do these things. Okay, yung mga bagay na hindi nila nagagawa as it is. And then second, more people are becoming self-employed. First muna pala, more organizations are being regional or global in nature and are relying on remote subgroups to do significant amounts of the work. Second, more people are becoming self-employed knowledge workers who contract their services remotely to various enterprises depending on their interests, skills, and availability. Diba katulad ngayon, as the online class natin, diba, we are working sa school but nandito kami sa bahay because of the pandemic, diba? We can work remotely. Examples include people who process digitized healthcare forms, software developers, website developers, distance learning instructors, just like us, financial traders, insurance salespeople, and telemarketers. So because these organizations can get certain functions accomplished remotely, the structure may become less hierarchical and more collaborative. Okay? Kasi nga, di ba, there are certain reasons bakit nagkakaroon ng yung mga katulad niyan, di ba, ng mga trabaho na it can be done using remotely. Ibig sabihin, kahit nasa bahay ka, pwede mong magawa. Okay? So, while it can be argued that these new network organizations exhibit many of the structural and functional characteristics found in the Parsons-Thomson's model, there are enough differences to merit discussion of a variation of that model, which may be better describe how organizations operate in a more global online business environment. So, si Parsons-Thomson model, it can be a good reference for the enterprise architecture. But, yun nga, dahil nga nagkaroon ng mga emergence of technology, diba, na nagkakaroon na ng mga remotely job na pwede mo naman gawin kahit na wala ka sa office. Okay, so yun yung mga certain limitation of the Parsons-Thomson model. And then we also have the organizational network model. So new types of organizations and enterprises are appearing, which are based on cooperative networks of local and remote individual workers and semi-autonomous teams who carry out key functions. In these enterprises, greater cost efficiency and more mission flexibility are achieved by removing layers of management that are not needed in a decentralized operating mode. So these teams are actually subgroups that have their own management level and technical level with core processes, and therefore will still exhibit some of the characteristics of the Parsons-Thomson model. The difference presented here is that the organizational or enterprise structure is based on these teams and remote workers, whose goals and functions may change depending on internal and external influences. Katulad nga nung nagkaroon ng ngayon, di ba, nagkaroon ng pandemic, merong mga managerial position na natanggal kasi hindi na sila kailangan. Like for example, sa mga BPO company. So there are certain positions na natanggal, may mga na lay off kasi hindi na sila kailangan. For example, partnership from this BPO company to school. So dahil wala nang face-to-face na class, di na makapag-conduct ng mga job fair and all. Diba? May mga certain team sa isang business or sa isang sa BPO na natanggal because of that pandemic. And called the Organizational Network Model or the ONM, an executive team sets policy and goals, approves resources, and evaluates results, while semi-autonomous functional teams and independent workers manage ongoing program lines of business, new development projects, and team-specific resources. Of course, sa mga executive team, sila yung nagsaset ng policy and goals dahil sila yung parang nasa pinakataas. Okay? And they approve resources na request from the managerial position and evaluates results. And of course, kailangan every now and then nagsasend ng reports yung mga nasa baba so that they can able to evaluate the result. Okay? And the functional teams and independent workers receive policy, goals, and general direction from the executive team, yet carry out organizational function in an independent and cooperative manner, depending on the goals. So we have here, okay, meron tayong executive team, meron tayong functional team A and the functional team B, na they are also reporting to the executive team. So same dun sa D. Okay, and then we have the independent worker, okay, na reporting from different functional, but also they are directed to the executive team. And there are external functional team, okay, na beyond their organizational boundary, and they are reporting from the different functional team na connected dun sa executive team. So being less hierarchical, this flatter and more flexible ONM organization can respond to changing requirements more quickly by creating, modifying, or eliminating functional teams or adjusting the number and type of independent workers. So these types of ONM organization enterprises can also exist as extended supply chains or network of teams from inside and outside the traditional organizational boundary. Kung napansin nyo, di ba, ngayong pandemic, nagkaroon ng mga layoff, ay nagtanggal ng mga empleyado, for example, sa mga airlines. Dahil nakaban halos ng lahat mga country from each other, di ba? Maraming mga airlines ang nag-layoff ng kanilang mga employee. Maraming mga cabin crew, di ba, mga pilot na nawalan ng trabaho because of the pandemic. So, ayun, depende kasi dun sa function nila. Of course, meron pa rin namang manatitira, but alam niyo naman kapag ka sa mga ganyang organization, ang mga huling pumasok sila yung mga unang natatanggal. So, last in, first out. And then we have the relating function teams to EA, lines of businesses. Ayan, meron tayong LOB1, LOB2, and LOB3. So, those are the lines of business. So, pwede yung sa LOB1, that's for the functional team D, yung nasa external. And then, yung LOB2 sa B, and then LOB3 sa A. Then, we also have the organizations and enterprises. So, organizations and enterprises are similar in that they are both types of social entities that have a culture, a formal and informal structure, goals, activities, and resources. The difference is that an enterprise can be defined as a subset of an organization and can involve multiple organizations. So they are both entities that have a culture, okay? A formal and informal structure, goals, activities, and resources. Ang pagkakaiba lang nila, ang enterprise can be defined as a subset of an organization or can involve multiple organizations. So why isn't this book called Introduction to Organizational Architecture? Because that would largely limit the subject to architectures that encompass an entire organization. Okay, so kaya nga tinawag yung subject ng enterprise architecture, not organizational architecture. And whilst those architectures are important, a more versatile concept is an enterprise, right, which can cover part of the organization, all of the organization, or multiple organizations. So enterprises are normally made up of vertical, horizontal, and extended components. So vertical components, also known as line of business or segments, are activities areas that are particular to one line of business. Okay, for example, Research and development, doon lang sila nakafocus, dun sa research and development. That is the vertical component. And the horizontal components, ito naman yung cross-cutting enterprises, are more general areas of activities that serve multiple line of business. So, iba-iba. Pwede siya sa isang part ng business, ng isang process ng business. Okay? But, nasa isang team pa rin sila. And then, extended components comprise more than one organization. For example, externets and supply chains. So, EA views of vertical components are complete standalone architectures in that they contain documentation from all levels of the EA framework. These types of vertical components are also known as the segments. So, when vertical segments are documented using the same EA framework, they can be aggregated into a larger architecture picture that may cover several or line of business. So, this may be a preferable way to develop the first version of enterprise EA, as it allows them to undertake a more manageable amount of work at less initial cost compared to attempting to do the EA for the enterprise all at once without prior experience. So, kumbaga dito, sa vertical components, okay, this is a standalone architectures. Kumbaga, pwede siyang magamit ng ibang entity. Okay, yung tinatawag nating segments. This is called a segmented approach to documenting the overall EA. The segmented approach is also useful in large or decentralized enterprise where parts of the architecture may need to develop and maintained by a number of different groups. And then understanding culture. Understanding the culture of enterprise is essential to developing realistic views of how strategic goals are established, how processes functions, and how resources are used. So every enterprise is different in some way, as are the vertical, horizontal, and or extended sub-enterprises. So this is due to the culture of the enterprise being an amalgamation of the values, beliefs, habits, and preferences of all of the people throughout the enterprise or sub-enterprise. So yun, nakadepende kasi yun din sa cultures. Diba? Depende sa, kasi minsan may mga certain part na enterprises, okay, na pareho lang sila ng functions, pareho sila ng business operation, pareho sila ng line of business. But nagkakaiba sila dun sa culture. Diba? Minsan, etong time na to, okay, or 24/7, nag-work sila in certain part ng isang business. But isang certain part naman ng business, okay, ibang business or company, they're not working 24/7. So, meron silang mga certain time na sarado talaga. Kumbaga, meron silang mga ginagawa na depende dun sa culture nila. Then, di ba, may mga tindahan na open 24/7 and there are some store na hindi naman sila open 24/7. So, same goes to sa mga fast food, di ba? Depende. And then, managing change. Changes within the enterprise will happen regardless of the presence of an EA program. However, they will happen in a more disjointed or completely independent manner without EA. The effect of the EA program is to coordinate changes such that it is much more driven by new strategies and business requirements and less by new technologies. Okay, so ito kasi CEA, it is for the coordination changes. Okay, it is more driven by the new strategies and new business requirements and less by new technologies. According to John Cotter, to date, major change efforts have helped some organizations adapt significantly to shifting conditions, have improved the competitive standing of others, and have positioned a few for a far better future. But in too many situations, the improvements have been disappointing and then carnage has been appealing, which with wasted resources and burnouts, scared or frustrated employees. So yun, dahil nga sa changes, di ba? Ang hirap kasi mag-adapt ng changes. Katulad na lang sa atin nung nagkaroon ng pandemic, di ba? Yung transition natin from face-to-face class to this kind of online class, di ba? Masyado tayong parang na culture shock, di ba? Doon sa changes. But as the time goes by, di ba, nakaka-adapt na tayo. And sooner or later, magkakaroon ulit ng face-to-face class. But titignan din natin na baka hindi na rin matanggal itong mga online classes. So people can be resistant to changes in their environment, whether it is at home or the workplace. If the EA program promotes changes in the enterprise, and the people are often resistant to any type of change when they do not have some level of control, then the EA program may be resisted by stakeholders unless something is done to increase their level of control. So increasing their level of control helps to successfully manage change and can be accomplished in several ways, including involving stakeholders in the EA program establishment and management. Okay, so kailangan kasi consider din sila yung mga stakeholders pagka gumagawa ka ng mga EA programs. And regularly and effectively communicating EA activities to stakeholders, allowing for stakeholders input to EA planning and decision making, and managing stakeholders' expectations as to what the EA program can do. Katulad niyan, di ba, kayo as part of the stakeholders of the school, di ba? Of course, one thing to consider is yung capabilities din ng mga students, okay, and yung mga inputs niyo. Kino-consider yan bago mag-come up with a decision. And we have the key term, change management. The process of setting expectation and involving stakeholders in how a process or activity will be changed so that the stakeholders have some control over the change and therefore may be more accepting of the change. Okay? So, yan yung sa change management. Hindi lang kung ano yung alam nung nasa executive and managerial position. And of course, they need to consider the stakeholders. So, those who are affected by the EA program are called EA stakeholders. And they are the ones most likely to resist the program or changes that are perceived to be product of the EA program. Therefore, one of the things that the EA program manager needs to ensure is that there is a stakeholders involvement in as many aspects of the EA program as is possible. So this includes governance and oversight activities, the selection of an EA framework and methodology, participation in and reviews of documentation activities, and participation in the development of and updates to the EA management plan. Okay, so dito sa change management, ang isang EA manager, okay, o yung mga program manager, so they need to consider or kailangan pagka gagawa ng mga programs, kailangan kasama yung mga stakeholders. Ang tawag doon is EA stakeholders. Of course, they need to consider yung mga nasa stakeholders nila. Okay? Para hindi sila mabigla dun sa changes na pwedeng mangyari. And another aspect of managing change within the EA program is regular and effective communication on program activities with all stakeholders. This includes formal documentation such as an EA program communication plan, the EA management plan, and notices regarding the periodic update of the current and future EA views. It also includes informal communication on an ongoing basis with all stakeholders to ensure that their participation and support is maintained. Diba? Katulad na lang kapag nagkakaroon ng changes sa isang organization. So, one key is the communication, diba? They need to communicate with the stakeholders ano ba yung mga changes na naganap. Okay, for example, nagkaroon ng changes dun sa isang supermarket. Okay, sabi nila, pwede na silang tumanggap ng GCash, okay, yung mga cashless payment. Okay, so merong mga certain communication ibibigay sa mga tao. For example, pagpasok nila, diba, pwede silang magbigay ng mga ang tawag dito, mga papel na nagsasabi na yung pwede na silang tumanggap ng cashless payment. Okay? Or kapag may promo din sila, diba, by using televisions, radios, Facebook pages, diba, they can able to communicate with the stakeholders. And then as a summary, so this chapter describes how enterprises are types of social organization and discuss the importance of understanding the structure and culture of the enterprise that an EA is documenting. While it's also important to understand the enterprise processes and supporting technologies, it is the people of the enterprise who makes plans and decisions about strategic direction, business activities and resources utilization. It also covered influences on the field of EA and presented two models of organizations and enterprises that can assist in the development of current and future EA views. Finally, the importance of managing changes was discussed in that EA program activities may be resisted by stakeholders who feel a loss of input or control. Kasi 'di ba, as kapag yung mga stakeholders, 'di ba, kung nafe-feel nila na hindi sila nagkakaroon ng karapatan, 'di ba? Ang nangyari sa inyo as a student, you feel frustrated. Okay? So magre-resist kayo dun sa changes. But kapag kino-consider yung mga inputs niyo as a stakeholders, 'di ba? Ang mas maganda yung makapag-adapt agad dun sa changes. Okay? So the details of institute change management will be discussed in the chapter 4. And that's all. So if you have any question, just have to comment or message your teacher. So good day, everyone.